laptop in addition to her camera, and he is convinced that she either both that did not disseminate any of the pictures, nor at this point in time does she have the ability to disseminate any of those pictures. Just as again, a real brief editorial kind of on both sides, if you will. I understand fully and appreciate your level of uncomfortableness of seeing someone take your photograph. I completely get that. On the other hand, she is what I would say is a relatively young media person. She made a mistake, and she's on her way back to her home, and she's not going to be back in this courtroom for the remainder of this trial. So with that, I am confident that we have taken the necessary steps that none of you are going to end up on any newspaper or any outlet tomorrow or any time through the remainder of the trial. But this is also your opportunity. I wanted to give it to you. Does anyone view it differently? Does anyone have any questions or concerns as we go forward? Carrie, can you think of anything I've left out?
I cannot.
Yes, ma'am.
Hopefully nothing like this happens, but in the future, if something like this were to happen, are we, I mean, she spoke out, are we to raise our hand? Do we wait and talk? I mean, what is the correct procedure when something like that happens?
Well, again, I want to emphasize that I'm not sure how many of you saw it, but I just can't say strongly enough that the juror who helped identify this absolutely positively did the correct thing. And what in answer to your question is this. If you are comfortable bringing something to our attention immediately, please do so. If for whatever reason you want to wait until the next break, that's fine also. But if you see something that concerns you, bring it to our attention. Does that answer your question?
I have one thing, sorry. Just, I know we're going to be filming,
Carrie, I'm going to turn that over to you.
The recording does, the cameras that are here do not pick you guys up. It is only faced towards this section of the room.
Yeah.
So I knew that, but like when I spoke.
Was the video or was it volume?
That I cannot tell you because I think I shut it off before you spoke, but I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know the answer either, but clearly there wouldn't be a picture associated with that voice. To the extent it's a voice, it would be voice and voice only, and it may have been cut off by then.
Luckily my voice cracked.
So I don't know if it would have picked you up or not.
The gentleman who was here was a reporter, and he didn't do anything wrong, so he'll be back as soon as this afternoon. I think there won't be anyone to replace her today, but I think as of Monday, there will be a photographer back here. And again, we will emphasize again that the photos are only to be this way and not that way. Yes, I'm willing to tell you that because that will be out there in the media, so I don't have any problems telling you that. It's with the Daily Iowan out of Iowa City. It's the local newspaper there.
Thank you.
Now, anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. And then, sir, Andrew, you go to the restroom and we won't start back up without you, okay? Thank you. Our lunch recess, we're in the presence of the jury. Mr. Bahena is present along with the attorneys of record. Ms. Johnson, I want to remind you, you're still under oath. And Mr. Brown, you may continue with direct examination of this witness.
Thank you, Judge. Before we get started with my continued examination, we have added 2 photos to our list. They're not on the list I've prepared for you, so but I believe we have agreement on them. States 86 is a photo of the underwear that were located that Ms. Johnson's testified about. And then states 87 is the view opposite of the crime scene tape view. So we're going to offer those in as states 86 and 87.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection.
At this time, states exhibits 86 and 87 are admitted.
Are we ready?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Johnson, I want to take you back to the area in the cornfield that you examined. Let's go ahead and look at those photos we just admitted. And actually, Judge, I think I have them backwards on the number, so my apologies. 86 will be the view back out of the cornfield. 87 is the view of the underwear. Sorry about that.
No problem. The record will so reflect.
All right. 86 is on the screen. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Whenever we had you testify this morning, we had States Exhibit 27, which is now on the screen.
Yes.
That's a view into the corn near where Mollie Tibbetts was found. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
States Exhibit 86, which has just been admitted, is what view?
This is the view facing back towards the gravel road, facing north.
Opposite direction of the photo we just viewed. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And that distance, again, from this location back to the road is how far? Is it a little over 400 feet?
430,
Okay.
I believe it was.
All right. You did measure it with a wheel. Is that right?
Yes.
From where you stood at this location, could you see vehicles on the road?
No.
Could you see any persons on the road?
No.
All right, States Exhibit, let's move forward into the area. States Exhibit 87 is what?
This is the striped fabric that we feel was her underpants, or a pair of underpants in the cornfield.
All right, and just to orient the jury a bit, again, States Exhibit 24 is now on the screen. The underpants are represented in this diagram on the far bottom left. Is that true?
Yes, item 8.
And 87 is a photo of those underpants, correct?
Correct.
Did you collect the underpants, the headband, and the shorts as evidence?
Yes, I did.
And were those transported back to the crime lab for any further analysis if that would have been needed?
Yes, they were.
Okay. All right, I want to, we're just about done, so I just want to briefly go back to the car. States Exhibit 44, where was that picture taken?
This was taken in the DCI crime laboratory garage.
Okay. States Exhibit 43, where was that photo taken?
This was taken at the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office garage.
The Sally Port?
Correct.
So this would have been taken on August, what date do you recall?
20th.
Right. Whenever you first were called to Poweshiek County?
Correct.
There is an area here on the trunk liner that appears to be a blood stain. Would you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's take it back. The cursor is just below that area. Would you agree with me?
No,
I'm sorry. Is that it here?
yes.
Okay.
I believe it's above the cursor in that position.
Okay, so this area that appeared to be blood, you actually overlooked that at the Sally Port on that day, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and we were able to collect that stain, though, 2 days later when the car was brought to the DCI lab?
Yes.
It's a reddish stain. I don't have a pointer on this view, but it's a reddish stain that we can see here on the rubber seal,
Yes.
right here. Is that correct?
Above the pointer.
All right. That stain was collected when?
On the 22nd of August.
Whenever the car was brought back to the crime lab, were the other items that we see here in the trunk, were those still there?
Yes.
Were they in, for the most part, the same position as you see them here in the photo?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing else was added or taken away that you know of?
No.
And just to be crystal clear here, State's Exhibit 46 with the ruler, this is that same red stain that we saw in the photo at the Sally Port, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Johnson, we've talked to you a bit about how long you took to examine the Malibu on 2 different occasions. Whenever you were called out to the area where Mollie Tibbetts was located, how long did you spend searching that area for any evidence or clues?
I believe that would have been, I could look at my notes to be exact, but we were there until at least lunch, so 4 or 5 hours.
Okay, and Jonna Berry was the person who assisted you at the field, is that right?
Yes, she did.
Okay, and was she with you on the time whenever you examined the Malibu at the Sally Port or at the garage at the sheriff's office in
Yes, she
Montezuma?
was.
Okay. And did she also assist you in the search of the Malibu on August 22nd of 2018?
Yes, she did.
And I may have already asked you this, but the trunk liners that you removed from the vehicle, we'll go back to State's Exhibit 43. These liners that we see here, correct?
Yes, we removed the top liner, the 2 side liners, and the bottom liner.
Okay, and those are all taken and kept at the DCI lab for analysis or at the sheriff's office to be tested for analysis if that became necessary, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, at any time during your examination of the Malibu or the location where Mollie Tibbetts was located, did you ever have access to any blood or bodily fluid of Mollie Tibbetts?
No.
All right, hang on a second. At this time, I have no further questions of Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
Defense may cross-examine.
Ms. Johnson, a couple questions. First of all, what does cross-contamination mean?
Cross-contamination could occur if something got dirty or someone else's DNA got mixed with a sample, possibly.
I would assume that the lab has pretty strict procedures when making sure that there's no cross-contamination.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
With your office, are there any safeguards that you have when you're processing a scene? What do you wear? Do you wear gloves? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. When we are processing at the scene, we are wearing usually a nitrile glove, and we use swabs that are in a sealed condition prior to opening them to collect a sample. And then the samples are placed in a box and placed in an envelope and sealed prior to submission.
Let me ask you, I guess, a more clear question. I know, and I'll ask you about the specific pictures in a bit, but I know that there's some pictures that have people that have shoes. Their shoes are covered with kind of a blue plastic suit, and it seems to be covering their entire body also.
There were some people from the medical examiner's office that were more clothed, had more PPE, personal protective equipment, than what I would typically wear at a crime scene.
All right. And when you arrived, or when you responded to the crime scene, and so specifically the place where Mollie Tibbetts' body was, what did you, and not what did you wear that day, like what did you wear, but what personal protective equipment did you have on?
I had on our regular uniform and nitrile gloves.
Why do you wear gloves when you're dealing with evidence?
Depending on what the evidence is, I especially don't want to leave my fingerprints on items, or also in the case of DNA, you can leave epithelial cells that would leave your DNA on an item.
Have you heard of cases where police officers' DNA has been found with the items submitted?
Yes, I believe that happens.
And sometimes there's, I guess, sometimes there's no way to prevent that. Sometimes officers are responding to a very emergent situation that they need to deal with. Is that right?
Yes.
But the best practices would be for officers, once the situation is cleared and there's no emergent situation, the best practice would be to wear gloves. Is that right?
Yes, and I think that's more for their protection also, not just to protect the evidence.
Now, the car, this Malibu that you looked at, you were called at approximately 3:30 on August 20th, 2018. Is that right?
Yes.
And how is it that your office is involved in something?
Well, we typically get involved when our agents request our assistance because they may not have the capabilities or the equipment to process the scenes properly, fully.
So someone called, do they call you directly on your cell phone, or what is it that, how do they get you involved?
Yes, we, each of us within the criminalistics laboratory carries a cell phone now as our way of communicating with other people. So they can contact us directly.
Who contacted you directly to become involved in this case?
Special agent in charge, Rick Ron,
And that was at 3:30 p.m., is that correct?
approximately.
What did he tell you about the reason he wanted you to become involved?
He said that there were some vehicles that needed to be processed.
Was it your understanding that he was, that there was an interview going on at the same time?
Yes.
And so specifically, you were aware, and maybe not aware specifically that my client was being interviewed, but you were aware that there was a suspect being interviewed simultaneously with your work. Is that right?
I believe it was a person of interest that was being interviewed at that time.
And so what they wanted you to do is to search for any clues or any information that could be useful to them. Is that correct?
I am not exactly sure of their intentions, but I suppose that could be helpful to them, yes.
Well, let me ask you this. While you're searching, are you giving any updates to Rick Ron or another law enforcement officer?
Yes, I did give an update of our processing.
And what was the update? What did you say?
The one update that I gave was about the brown hairs that we found in the trunk.
Okay. What did you say that you found in the trunk?
I said that we found long brown hairs in the trunk.
Now, what I'm wondering is there's no hairs that were actually, there were no hairs that were actually looked at or examined at the DCI. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what happened with the hairs, if that's beyond my expertise.
Have you reviewed Tara Scott's, have you reviewed her report?
No.
So you're not aware that she never tested those hairs?
I do not know what was done with the hairs.
Did you convey any more information that could be of assistance to law enforcement?
I asked them at the end of our processing, I requested that the vehicle be submitted to the laboratory because my equipment was not working properly.
One of the things that I note is there were several different kids' items that were found in the Chevy Malibu. Is that right?
Yes.
And specifically, kids' items that were found. There was a SpongeBob plastic bag, is that right?
Yes, that was in the trunk.
There was a pink child's toy.
Yes,
Where was that found?
in the trunk.
There was a car seat that was found,
Yes, it was in the back seat of the car.
and there were other items associated with a child. Is that right?
Possibly.
Now, you noted in your report that there was a latex glove described as a gray glove from the trunk interior of the black Malibu. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm going to publish State's Exhibit 43. It's already in evidence.
43?
Yes,
I got it here, Scott.
we got it.
You don't want me to look at it? Okay.
That's the exhibit showing the Malibu trunk. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is. I don't see a gray glove there. Could you explain that, ma'am?
Sure. It's located behind the football.
Sorry.
Were there any pictures documenting where that gray glove was found?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, can you take that down? We have an exhibit that hasn't been offered yet. Ma'am, in front of you, is there another picture that is marked as Defendant's Exhibit Z.
Counsel, can I have you approach, please?
Exhibit Z.
No, I have a blank screen.
Thank you. Do you see Defendant's Exhibit Z now?
Yes, I do.
This is another photograph of the trunk, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And that was another photo that you took on August 20th, 2018, is that right?
Correct.
I'd offer Defendant's Exhibit Z.
Any objection? Yeah, go ahead.
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit Z as in zebra is entered.
And ma'am, now that's published for the jury. This is another photo of the back of the trunk, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you point out to the jury where that glove is?
You can't see it in this photo because it's obscured by the seatbelt.
So you're saying that it's somewhere there, but that it's covered, is that right?
There's another photo that I took that shows where the glove is. I'm sorry.
All right. Now, ma'am, are you often called to investigate or to process crime scenes and possible missing persons case?
Yes.
And so if someone's missing, you may be asked to look at their home or a suspect's home to check for evidence. Is that right?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the process of working inside out?
We typically work outside in.
Okay. And what I mean is in an investigation that you look at the people closest to a missing person or a victim and then work your way out from that.
Okay, I'm not an investigator.
Okay, so you've never heard of that process before?
No.
One of the things that your office does is you process buccal swabs, is that right?
Yes, the DNA section processes buccal swabs.
And when that is done, it can be, what is a buccal swab, ma'am?
A buccal swab is a known DNA sample taken from someone by using clean swabs on the inside of the cheek area.
So with reference to my client in this investigation, a buccal swab would be presumably taken from him, is that right?
I don't know that they took a buccal swab from him.
And in reference, the best practices would be to have a buccal swab from anybody that's involved in the case, is that right?
It depends on what kind of evidence you're looking at.
And the comparison for that would be specifically for DNA evidence, is that correct?
Yes, DNA.
Now explain to me, when you are looking for fingerprint evidence, what is it that, what is your procedures?
It depends on what kind of evidence we're looking at. We could either search using like a black powder and a feather brush, or we could use magnetic powder and a magnetic applicator, or we could use a super glue fuming to try to enhance the latent prints. It depends on the situation.
In this case, and specifically from the Chevy Malibu, did you collect any fingerprint evidence?
No, I collected evidence to be analyzed for fingerprints.
What evidence did you collect to be analyzed for fingerprints?
The contents of the trunk that wasn't analyzed for DNA.
What specifically did you collect, ma'am?
There was a volleyball, a plastic bag containing the fish stringer, all of the other fishing items that weren't the fishing pole, a child's toy, a Pepsi can, the plastic liner in the trunk that wasn't coated in fabric. And I'd have to look at the list to recall what else was in there.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
This is your report. I'll probably refer to Tara Scott's too.
Scott, do you have any problem with her having her report up there? It also has Tara Scott's for reference, I'm not gonna ask.
Thanks. Ma'am, were any, can you discuss what specific items were submitted for fingerprint analysis in this case?
The SpongeBob plastic bag, the window scraper, the wrapping paper, plastic bag containing the fish stringer, a plastic container with fishing hooks, plastic bag with bobbers. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead and take your time.
Plastic bag for egg sinkers, pink child's toy, volleyball, black plastic tube, Pepsi can, red and white coupon, and the plastic guard liner.
And so those would be the specific items that were submitted for examination, is that correct?
For latent prints.
All right, now I'd ask you to take a look at it. Actually, it's not Tara Scott's report, it's Anna Young's report. There were additional items that were submitted from the Malibu for print testing, is that right?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, there were additional items that were submitted from the Malibu for fingerprint testing, is that correct?
I told you what was submitted from the Malibu for fingerprint testing.
Okay, all right, so you're saying that there was nothing else that was submitted, is that right?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
And what you're saying is that the items that you listed were submitted, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Scott, can you bring up, I can't remember which one was the underwear picture is either 87 or 86. Ma'am, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 87. That's the photo that you believe is underwear, is that right?
Yes.
Now, with regards to the victim's body, it's pretty obvious that the running shoes that are placed right next to her would be associated with her, is that right?
I would assume so.
And same with the socks that were on her body, is that right?
Yes.
Same with the bra, the sports bra, the pink sports bra that was on her body, is that correct?
Correct.
How far was State's Exhibit 87 from this body?
Approximately 34 feet.
And it was found, I guess, kind of lodged in some dirt, is that correct?
I don't know if I would say lodged in. It was on the surface of the field.
Okay, it was on the surface of the field, is that right?
Yes.
Is there additional testing that was requested for DNA or seminal fluid?
We don't specify what kind of testing. We just ask for DNA.
So what you would do is just ask for DNA testing on this particular item, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the analyst that is assigned to the case could test the item for DNA, is that right?
Yes.
That what would happen is they would develop a profile, is that correct?
I'm not a DNA expert. I'm not. I don't want to answer
That's fine.
those questions beyond my expertise.
They test for DNA, is that right?
Correct.
They'd also test for any sort of seminal fluid or any sort of sperm, is that correct?
If it's requested of them,
And that was requested in this case?
I do not know.
I'm sorry, I really did not hear the answer.
I do not know.
And the same thing with the shorts, is that correct?
I do not know what was requested of them.
So you just collected it, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you want me to? No further questions, thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, I did forget to ask you one thing. Ms. Johnson, did you and anybody that was associated with you on the crime scene team search residence, a trailer that was believed to belong to Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
I did.
All right. And when would you have searched the trailer?
That was immediately after the scene at the cornfield.
Okay. And were there two knives that were collected at that scene that were submitted for further analysis?
We collected one knife that day, and then I believe someone went back and did a further search and decided that they wanted the other one also submitted.
And these knives are folding knives?
The one that I collected was a folding knife.
Okay, and that would have been submitted to the lab for DNA analysis, is that right?
Yes, I believe that was submitted for DNA and latent prints.
Okay, and there was also a napkin that appeared to have blood on it that was located at that trailer, is that right?
Yes, there was.
All right, was that also seized?
Yes, I collected that.
All right, and in your search of the trailer that belonged to the defendant, well, actually, do you have that address, the location where it was at?
It was rural Brooklyn.
That's fine.
I have the report in front of me.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to refresh your memory to the address, please do that.
(4123) 200th Street.
Okay, this is a rural area near Brooklyn, Iowa.
Yes.
All right. How long did you spend searching the trailer that belonged to Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Approximately 3 hours.
In your search of the trailer, did you notice any other blood stains, bloody areas, anything of that nature?
There were a couple areas that we screened for blood, but they were negative presumptive.
Did you find anything in the trailer that belonged to Mollie Tibbetts?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And was that the only time that you would have searched the trailer that you described?
Yes.
Ms. Freeze asked you about the search of the Malibu, correct?
Yes.
And she asked you about cross-contamination, is that right?
Yes.
Would you have had any item in your possession that would have either purposely or inadvertently been placed in the Malibu that would have had Mollie Tibbetts' blood on it?
No. All of the doors and the trunk were sealed at the Powashik County Sally Port before we left.
You did that sealing, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
All right, and when the car arrived at the lab, were those seals still in place?
Yes, they were, and it was documented by the person who received the car.
There was no evidence that you found of any kind of tampering with the vehicle, is
Not
that
that
correct?
I'm aware. Correct.
All right. Okay, that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Any recross?
Does your office have a specific section that deals with weapons?
Our firearms section deals with guns, but if I'm not sure beyond that what you're referring to.
No further questions.
Anything else to this witness, Mr. Brown?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Johnson, thank you for being here. You're excused. The state may call its next witness.
Judge, our final witness of the day is Tara Scott.
Thank you.
Scott, I'll swear you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Scott, if you would head over there, please. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please state your name for the record.
Tara, T-A-R-A, Scott, S-C-O-T-T.
And how are you employed?
I am a criminalist in the DNA and crime scene sections at the Iowa State Crime Lab in Ankeny, Iowa.
How long have you been employed at the crime lab?
I have been a criminalist since October of 2007.
All right. What is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut.
And can you just briefly outline the training and experience that you've received that qualify you as a criminalist in the DNA section?
After I was hired, I have received a minimum of one external training a year since 2007.
Okay. And other than being assigned to the DNA section of the laboratory, do you have other duties within the lab?
Yes.
What are those?
I work in the crime scene section
How long have you been a crime scene analyst?
since 2009.
And have you received training to have that position at the lab?
Yes.
Over the course of your employment with the Iowa DCI Crime Lab, how many, if you can just estimate, how many crime scenes have you analyzed?
I believe it's between 60 and 70.
And you've testified before in the Iowa courts on your analysis of crime scenes?
Yes.
All right, and how about with DNA? How many cases have you worked where you've been requested to search for a person's DNA?
I don't know how number of cases. We used to average about 20 a month, and now average probably about 12.
Okay, and you've testified before in Iowa courts on DNA, is that correct?
Yes.
Testified in several of my cases, is that right?
Yes.
All right, we always seem to cross paths, don't we?
Frequently.
All right. All right, let's talk first about your work as a crime scene analyst in this case, okay?
Okay.
Were you called to the area in Brooklyn, Iowa on July 20th of 2018?
Yes.
And what was the purpose that you were called to Brooklyn, Iowa on that date?
We were to look for any body fluids or signs of a struggle inside of a house and garage.
Okay, where was that house located in Brooklyn?
May I refer to my notes to refresh my recollection?
Yeah, I can help you with the address, actually.
Okay.
If you can get your report out, though. Go ahead.
Okay.
Ms. Scott, was the address that you were called to analyze or search 622 West Des Moines Street in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Do you know who that house belonged to?
It was friends of the missing person.
Friends of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
All right. All right. Blake, does the name Blake Jack or Dalton Jack, does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay. Did you examine the house at 622 West Des Moines?
Yes.
Did you look for signs of a struggle?
Yes.
Did you find any?
No.
Did you examine the doors and the windows of 622 West Des Moines?
Yes.
And did you find anything unusual?
No.
All right. Who was with you, by the way, on the crime scene team at 622 West Des Moines?
Kelsey Rusbarsky.
All right, we'll get the spelling for you. Were other agents from DCI present as well?
I believe there's one present with us.
Okay. And how would you generally describe the interior of the home as far as, you know, how it was kept?
It was lived in.
Okay. And did you see, were there two dogs that also were at the house?
They were removed before we arrived.
Were you told that they had been in the basement prior to your arrival?
Yes.
Now, whenever I ask you, did you see any signs of a struggle, what does that mean to you?
We're looking for overturned furniture, if there's body fluids, if there's hairs, clumps of hairs, something like that, anything to indicate that there was a struggle that had occurred.
All right. Did you see any signs of a struggle at 622 West Des Moines?
No.
Did you know who the missing person was at the time that you searched the house at 622 West Des Moines?
Yes.
Who was that?
Mollie Tibbetts.
All right. Did you find any items in the house that readily were indicated to you that they belonged to Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
Can you just describe those for us, please?
We found her wallet that had some cards with her name in it and her driver's license, and a water bottle in the bedroom we were told she was staying in that had her initials on it, MT.
Did you seize or take any of those items at that time?
Yes.
Did all of the ones that you just listed, did you take those?
We took the water bottle, but I don't believe the crime scene team collected the wallet.
So the water bottle that was taken was the water bottle that had the initials MT?
Yes.
Why would you have taken a water bottle such as you described?
We were looking for anything that might contain her DNA.
Okay. So I know you're a DNA analysis, but how would that work? What would you do in order to try to obtain Mollie Tibbetts' DNA from that water bottle?
From something like that, we would swab the mouth area and use that swab to run to see if I could develop a DNA profile from it.
Did you seize any other items that you could have done like testing?
Yes.
Or what items were those?
A Arnold Palmer half and half iced tea lemonade can, a Dr. Pepper can, and a Reach brand toothbrush from the upstairs bathroom were what I collected for possible DNA from Mollie.
All right. Ultimately, which of those items was used to gain a presumptive DNA profile of Mollie Tibbetts?
The Bubba water bottle.
Okay. And I use the term presumptive DNA profile, correct?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means we presume that's her profile, but we don't, it's not taken directly from her, so we can't say with 100% certainty that's her profile.
Okay. And do you make other efforts to confirm that profile as Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
How is it that you would go about doing that?
We requested known samples from her biological mother and biological father and did a comparison to see if she could or could not be eliminated as a child of them.
Okay, and what were the results of that particular testing?
That the profile could not be eliminated as a child of her biological parents.
So does that mean that the DNA profile that you developed off of the water bottle is the presumptive DNA profile of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
Was there anything else of significance that you took from the house for purposes of further analysis?
I don't believe there's anything else tested that we took.
Okay. How long did you spend at the house searching for items? Do you know?
We were there at 4:45 p.m. and left at 9:02 p.m.
Is it safe to say that you keep fairly extensive notes as to what your activities are on
Yes.
any particular examination?
Yes.
And that's what you were referring to whenever you took a pause to look at the your report, is that right?
Correct.
All right. Judge, before we go further with Ms. Scott, we do have an agreement on a stipulation with regard to certain evidence and other DNA that Ms. Scott utilized in her analysis in this case. If I may read that stipulation. I've provided a copy of it to the defense. I will provide a written copy to the court at a later time if that's acceptable.
Just before we go any further, the defense has seen the stipulation and you're on board with it.
We agreed to it pre-trial, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead then, Mr. Brown, proceed.
All right, the stipulation is as follows. Comes now the state and the defendant and stipulates to the following. Number one, investigators collected a water bottle found at 622 West Des Moines Street, Brooklyn, Iowa, on July 19th of 2018. The water bottle was believed to have belonged to Mollie Tibbetts due to the location where it was found, and the initials MT were on the bottle. Two, investigators collected the known DNA of the biological parents of Mollie Tibbetts, Laura Calderwood and Rob Tibbetts. Both samples were collected by Poweshiek County Deputy Sheriff Steve Kivy and were submitted to the DCI lab to be used for DNA analysis and comparison. Number three, Matt Lively from the State Medical Examiner's Office delivered the known fingernail and toenail clippings taken from a body autopsy by Dr. Dennis Klein and initially identified as Doe to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation for DNA analysis and comparison. Number 4, Michael Schmidt is a DCI criminalist qualified by education and training to perform DNA analysis. Number 5, Michael Schmidt performed DNA analysis on a bone, specifically the femur, which is the thigh bone, taken from the autopsy of Doe. Number 6, Michael Schmidt, if called as a witness, would testify that the DNA profile taken from the femur of Doe matched the DNA profile taken from the water bottle with the initials MT, which was taken from 622 West Des Moines Street, Brooklyn, Iowa. He would further testify that there was nothing in his analysis that would suggest that the DNA profiles taken from the parents of Mollie Tibbetts were inconsistent with the profile developed from the femur of Doe recovered from a cornfield near Guernsey, Iowa on August 21, 2018. And 7, based on Mr. Schmidt's DNA analysis, he would testify and conclude that the body located in the cornfield in rural Poweshiek County on 460th Avenue, Guernsey, Iowa on August 21st, 2018, initially identified as Doe, was that of Mollie Tibbetts. The parties would so stipulate.
And just to confirm, from the defense's standpoint, that is the stipulation.
Yes.
So stipulated. Thank you.
Again, I'll provide a written copy to the court at a later time. One thing I just want to clarify, if I may proceed.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, the date that you were at 622 West Des Moines in Brooklyn, Iowa was what date?
July 20th, 2018.
All right, we'll correct that in the stipulation. I think that was just my typographical error, so we'll correct the date to July 20th of 2018. And before we move on from 622 West Des Moines, I want to show you a couple of photos. State's Exhibit 7, which has already been admitted. State's Exhibit 7 is 622 West Des Moines. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
Is this the home that you would have searched on July 20th of 2018?
Yes.
All right. And then State's Exhibit 8, do you see that photo?
Yes.
Is this the water bottle? I'm going to point to it with an arrow. Is this the water bottle that you collected from the house that is that of Mollie, or that had the initials MT?
Yes.
All right, and where are we located in this picture in the house?
It is in a bedroom that we were told she was staying in. I believe it's the, double check, I think it was like northwest bedroom.
Okay, was it upstairs?
Yes.
Okay, this was the bedroom that you were told that she was residing in whenever she was at 622 West Des Moines?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Scott, let's switch gears a bit, okay? The rest of your involvement in this case has to do with DNA analysis, would you agree?
Yes.
All right, and you did DNA analysis in this case on really 2 separate occasions, would that be true?
Yes.
All right, we'll get into all of that, but first of all, I want to talk about DNA and what it is, okay?
Okay.
So in the plainest terms you can give us, all right, what is DNA testing? What is that?
So DNA testing looks at different locations in the DNA, tells you how many repeats are at that location on the DNA that you're testing, and gives us what we call a DNA profile.
Okay, so is DNA testing, does that relate to the genetic material that makes who we are?
Yes.
Okay. And whenever you mention, what was the term that you used?
The profile?
Yeah, so whenever, can you develop a DNA profile of any individual?
With sufficient material, yes.
Okay. Well, you do DNA testing at the lab, correct?
Yes.
And how long has the lab done such testing?
The 90s, I believe.
Okay. And have you received specific training in the testing and analysis of DNA?
Yes.
And do you receive continuing training in the area of DNA testing?
Yes.
So give us, in the simplest terms possible, an explanation of whether or not the DNA is the same in every cell of a person's body.
So all the nucleated cells in the body will have the same profile, yes.
Okay, and exactly what is a DNA profile?
So we test currently 21 locations. So that is the composite of all 21 of those locations.
Okay, whenever you talk about 21 locations, what are you referring to?
Those are the addresses or areas on the DNA that we are testing.
And can you get DNA from any cell in the body?
Any nucleated cell.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So red blood cells do not have a nucleus in them, so those do not have the kind of DNA testing that I do. Cannot take it from red blood cells, but white blood cells have a nucleus. So that has the nuclear DNA that we are testing.
Okay, so let's say, let me give an example. Let's say I cut my finger, all right, I'm bleeding, and a blood drop was left on the table. Would you be able to collect that blood drop and determine what Scott Brown's DNA profile would be?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, why do you just say most likely?
Because I can't determine the number of white blood cells in that sample from looking at it.
Okay, so you'd have to do some analysis, correct?
Yes.
And if there were white blood cells in the blood drop that I left behind, you should be able to obtain my DNA profile.
Yes.
Is my DNA profile unique to me?
Unless you have an identical twin.
I do not. So would it be unique to me?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a particular type of DNA testing that you do at the DCI crime lab?
Yes. Yes.
What is it called?
We do nuclear DNA testing.
Meaning what?
So we only test the DNA that's in the nucleus.
Okay. And was that the type of testing that you utilized in this case?
Yes.
Is this type of testing that we just described, is it utilized in other fields other than criminal investigation?
Yes.
Can you just give us an example of what that would be?
The most common would be paternity cases.
Okay. Paternity meaning what?
Trying to determine who the father is of a child if it's in question.
Okay. And are there controls and safeguards that are performed to ensure a reliable result?
Yes.
And can you briefly describe what those are, please?
We run known samples, like for when we do the amplification process, part of our process, we run something that we know what that profile is to make sure that the process is working as expected. We also run a negative control where we expect to find nothing in it and run that through the process to make sure that we do not get any unexpected DNA in it.
Okay. And were those safeguards and controls in place whenever you did the analysis on a number of items in this particular case?
Yes.
Now, before we get into the items that you tested, were you provided any known DNA samples in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay, and what were those known samples?
Those were the family, the mother, 2 brothers, and father of Mollie Tibbetts.
Okay. You also received a confirmatory DNA analysis from Michael Schmidt, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that we just stipulated to, correct?
Right. Yes.
All right. Were you able then to confidently say that you had the known profile of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
All right. And would you have used that for comparison to other items in the case that would have been collected that had possible DNA?
Yes.
All right. Were you also provided the known DNA profile of the defendant, Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Yes.
All right. Did you have any other known profiles that you would have utilized in this case to make comparisons to any of the items that you examined?
Double checking. No, I don't believe I did have any additional.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the items that you performed DNA analysis on, okay?
Okay.
There were a pair of black shorts, a pink fabric band, and a striped fabric that appeared to be underwear that were located in the cornfield near Mollie Tibbetts' body. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you perform DNA analysis on those 3 items?
Yes.
Specifically, what were you looking for on those items?
I was looking for any DNA that might be on there, either Mollie's or somebody else's.
Okay. Did you also look for the presence of sperm?
Yes.
All right. What was the result with regard to the analysis for the presence of sperm?
On the black shorts, I tested 15 areas, and a screening test did not indicate the presence of seminal fluid on those 15 areas.
So let me just clarify that. I think I got ahead of you a bit. So you first screened for, what was it?
Seminal fluid?
Okay, and if it's screened negative, you don't perform any other analysis. Is that right? With regard to that?
With regard to seminal fluid, no.
Okay. But you would have performed screening tests for blood, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other screening tests that you performed that you just described? Any other screening tests at all on the shorts or the pink fabric brand or the fabric that was believed to be the underwear?
So I also screened the black shorts for the presence of blood, and the results were inconclusive on those 2 areas. I did not note any stains on the pink fabric, so no DNA testing or screening was done on those. On the striped fabric, screening tests indicated the presence of blood, but did not indicate the presence of seminal fluid on 1 area of the striped fabric, and no sperm were microscopically identified in that sample.
Okay. Did it screen positive for blood?
Yes.
Okay. And what were the results of that analysis?
The DNA factors that I detected and the epithelial fraction of that striped fabric sample were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
Okay. So what does that mean when they are too weak for interpretation? Put that in layman's terms for us.
There was not enough information there for me to make a reliable comparison to anybody.
Okay. I want to ask you a couple questions about weak samples. That's what you commonly call it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it common in your field of work and expertise to get weak samples?
Depending on the situation, yes.
All right. I think in popular media, people have the notion that if you touch anything, rub up against anything, cough on anything of that nature, your DNA is going to be left behind that can be identified. Is that true?
No.
Okay. What affects that?
So it depends on how much, if you're touching something, if it's a smooth surface versus a rough surface, how much pressure or friction, if you touch it once versus touching it multiple times, if you rub on it, you're more likely, the more contact you have, you'll more likely to leave skin cells there. For people who are nail biters or thumb suckers, you load your hands with DNA when you do that from your mouth. So when you touch something, that person is more likely to leave a sample than somebody who does not put their hands in their mouth on a regular basis. So there's factors like that. How long something has been out and exposed. There are things that will inhibit DNA and degrade the DNA to the point where I can't get a profile from it.
So there are lots of things that may affect whether or not you can develop a profile that you can ultimately compare back to a known sample.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Scott, moving on, were there items submitted to you, a folding knife and a napkin with red stains that came from the residence of Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Yes.
And with regard to the folding knife, can you please describe to the jury what the results are of that particular testing and analysis?
Screening tests did not indicate the presence of blood on 3 areas of the folding knife. No DNA testing was attempted on that item.
Okay, so if it's screened negative for blood, you stop.
Yes.
No other reason to keep going?
No.
Okay. And with regard to the napkin with red stains that came from that same location, what were the results of that DNA analysis?
Screening tests indicated the presence of blood on the one stain that was screened on the napkin. The DNA profile developed matched the known DNA profile of Cristhian Rivera, and the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 26 octillion.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, let me stop you there. We do need to take an afternoon recess.
Okay. Can I just clarify what she just said, and then we can take a break?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You just provided a statistical number, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that something you're required to do in DNA analysis?
Yes.
And why is that?
To show how relevant the profile is and how the frequency of it in the population.
Okay. I thought you told me earlier that everybody's DNA was unique.
Yes.
Okay. So what does that statistical probability tell you with regard to the DNA profile that you developed off of the napkin?
So the statistics are used, they are calculated on each, it's called an allele at the location.
It's called a what?
Allele.
Okay, go ahead.
So for each allele at the location, a frequency of that it's seen in the population is determined. And we multiply those together to determine how frequent that profile would be in the entire population.
What's the population of the world? Roughly 6 billion?
I think, yeah, 6 billion.
Okay. So, in other words, it's a match, correct?
Yeah, so it's like that. I wouldn't expect to see it, in like only once out of 26 octillion. So yeah, that would be a very rare thing to see it ever again.
Okay, so you can confidently say that the blood that was on the napkin was that of Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Yes.
Okay, we can take a break now.
Members of the jury, we'll take a 10-minute recess at this time. I want to remind you of your admonition. Please leave your notebooks where they are. And Ms. Scott, you can go ahead and step down.